All right, we're recording, and I'm with the Author Wheel podcast crew. Can I call you a crew? I can call you a
You
crew.
Uh,
may.
sure. We're the duo. We're the
The
duo.
duo, the Author Wheel podcast duo, the
Yeah.
dynamic duo.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
Greta
I like
Boris,
that.
yeah, kind of. I don't know. It reminds me of that like old Batman TV show. But I don't know if that's a positive or a negative anymore. But
Yeah.
yeah, we'll keep it though because y'all can redefine the term.
There we go.
So with Greta Boris and Megan Haskell. I'm going to read your bios real quick because they're impressive and they sound really nice. Uh, Greta is the USA best-selling author of The Seven Deadly Sins Murders, a psychological suspense series, and the Monica Mortician Murders, a Cozy Paranormal series. She hails from sunny Southern California, where, based on her books, which are all set there, things are darker than you'd expect. Her stories have been called atmospheric and unputdownable, which is that's a nice adjective. Um, Megan is the award-winning author of I'm going to say that wrong. Megan, say that for me.
Signore.
Thank you.
Signore
Signore
Chronicles.
Chronicles, a
Mhm.
fast-paced dark, let's not make me pronounce things. A fast-paced dark fantasy adventure featuring a kick-ass heroine, snarky carnivorous pixies, and a quest across 9 fairy realms. Signare, the Last Descendant, Book 1, received the Reader's Favorite Bronze Award and was a finalist in the 2017 IAM Book of the Year Awards. And the Signare Rebel Apprentice, Book 3, was named a finalist in the 2018 Book Excellence Awards. So that's your fiction life, which again,
Yes.
super impressive. You also are
Thank you.
running the author wheel, and you've got 5 books out. Um, Publish, Take Charge of Your Author Career, The Quick Guide to Productive Writing Habits, Understanding Your Genre, Planning a Novel. That's 4. I said
Yeah.
5. Is there a 5th? Did I miss one?
There's
No,
not a fifth, but
Okay.
we're putting together the omnibus Kickstarter special edition as we
Nice.
speak of the quick guides, which will include a fourth section on author strategy.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. So I was excited to have y'all on because there's so much experience here and like so much thought, and y'all talk to so many great authors. You've just got a ton of things to share. So
Yeah.
let's start off. Talk to me about kind of your what got you started in your author journey.
All right. Do you
Meg,
want to go
you
or do you
can
want
go.
me to go?
I think you should go first this time. We'll take turns and be polite.
Oh, okay. All right. If we must.
Yes.
Yes. So for me, I was actually never a creative. Like I wasn't like one of those people that grew up writing stories as a kid. Not at all. I was always creative. Like I played piano and did art and stuff like that, but I never wrote stories. I actually graduated from USC with a undergraduate degree in finance.
Wow.
Yeah, but I was always a reader. And so when I was working, I had a corporate job with a long commute by train, and I needed a creative outlet. I started telling myself little stories about the people on the train. And then that led into buying a little mini, like tiny laptop. And I started writing on the train. And then, kind of caught the bug from there. And then when I got pregnant with my first daughter, I decided to quit my job to be a stay-at-home mom. But I'm not the kind of person that can really just be a stay-at-home mom. That
Yeah.
was like I started going mildly insane.
Hmm.
So I started writing it. I came up with a new character, started writing a story, and that became the Signore Chronicles, which the first book was published in 2015, about 3 weeks before I had my second daughter.
Nice. Squeezed it
And the
in
rest
there.
is history. Yeah, yeah,
That's very cool.
exactly.
Now,
Yep.
can I ask, did you go, are you independently published or are you traditionally published? Like, what was your choice around that route?
I'm indie.
Okay.
So for me, it was like when I first started writing, it was before Kindle, I think, even existed.
Hmm.
And maybe Kindle had just come out when I started writing. But
I mean, it was like
so
2012, 13, 14 in there somewhere.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I started writing on the train. I mean, that was like 2007, I think, or
Yeah.
2008. So at first I did do some research into traditional publishing and I knew what the process was like, at least theoretically. But then Kindle came out and like I started seeing all these other authors making money publishing themselves and running their own businesses. And again, I had that finance background, I had that business school background, and I had always wanted to run my own business. So to me, the choice was like, oh, this is a viable opportunity, I'm going to jump on it. Well, slowly. I'm a slow jumper.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was never any question for me. I always wanted to go indie. So I never even queried agents or anything like that.
Okay, that's fun.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I did the same thing. I didn't. I asked that question because I get it all the time from people. I'm like,
Yeah.
should I go indie or traditional? And I'm like, well, I mean, you have a choice, but you don't actually get to choose going traditional. You get to choose chasing traditional. But I did the same. I was like, I can't. I don't have. By the time I started writing, I had 4 children and 1 on the way. So there was like,
Yeah.
there's no time to like go to conferences and stuff. There's just survival.
Yeah, the networking required for traditional, I think, often gets in new writers' way, you know, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I will say now I'm going to bring this up because I just signed a book contract today. So I am,
Oh, congratulations.
and I have before. I do have both now. I am hybrid, but yeah. All right, Greta, give us how did you start? Where did your writing begin?
So I'm the exact opposite of Megan in that I was always a storyteller. I won a 5th grade poetry contest for all of New York City public schools.
Wow.
And my dad was an editor in magazines, and so I just kind of hovered between acting and drama and study of that, and literature and English in college. And then when I actually got a degree in fitness, which is a completely different story, so I won't bore everybody with that. But my first jobs were in magazines. You know, Daddy got me in, and I worked for probably, I don't know, maybe four or 5 different national magazines. Then I stopped doing that for a long time, but I kind of always thought maybe one day, you know, I would write something. So I finally did my first book. My first book was indie. It was called The Wine and Chocolate Workout. And it was, it was about
great
fitness.
title.
Yeah. The title was better than the book, is what I tell people. I actually hit, I know, I hit the Amazon top 100, and I was right next to the wheat belly diet for like a whole week on Amazon. But it was a response to all my clients and stuff. And so I wrote that book, and I did indie publish it because I didn't expect to do anything with writing. It was just like, oh, my clients want this book, so here it is, you know, and they bought it from me. And that was that. But then when I started back to writing, it kind of got me bit, you know, I kind of got bit by the writing bug, as Megan said. With that, I got back to writing, and I started immediately writing for magazines. And I was an editor for an online magazine because that's where I came from. So that made sense. A little known fact, I was the Walking Dead girl for Zombies magazine for a while. Just thought I would share that.
Nice.
Because
you don't know it to look at her, but she's actually quite dark.
I really
hysterical.
like zombies. What can I say?
That's awesome.
I know. So I actually interviewed Joanna Penn and another fiction author for a magazine I was working with. And I thought, oh, shoot, maybe I could write fiction. I kind of always thought that was only for special people, you know, not for just anybody. So I wrote fiction. And of course, I thought, well, fiction, you have to have it traditionally published. You just do. So I did go the traditional route. I got 75 rejections, cried a lot, drank a lot of wine, finally got published.
It's okay because it was on your diet. It worked.
Yeah. And I ate a lot of chocolate.
Yeah.
So I finally did get a publishing deal, and it was kind of nice because I pitched the first in the 7 Deadly Sins. So I immediately got a 2-book deal with, you know, a 7-book writer or 5 more books writer refusal, which is unusual, but you can't really write the 2 Deadly Sins or the 3 Deadly Sins. You kind of got to go for the whole tamale. So that is done traditionally. And Typically, what happens to a lot of writers who are traditional, it isn't all the roses, light, sunshine, and butterflies you thought it was going to be. There's great things about it. I'm not sad that I did it. I've always wanted to be a hybrid author, but now I am independently publishing the Mortician series and having a lot of fun with that.
Nice. That's great. I appreciate y'all sharing that. Part of the reason I ask, I don't ask everybody to tell their author journey, but for you two who have so much experience under your belt and have, have kind of very different trajectories, I think it's helpful for people starting out to hear like, hey, there's different ways you get about this.
Well, and
So-
that was kind of part of the reason we originally, I think I'm jumping ahead on your question list
I don't
here.
care. There's no order. This is yeah, this is chaotic beauty here. We're like just gonna run
Love
wherever we
it.
go. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, no, but that's actually kind of how we got started together, because we met at a local writers conference. And then we started attending a local writers group together. And we realized we had these two different perspectives. I was going indie. I was very focused on that. And at the time, and things have shifted some. We had a whole episode on defining success, but at the time I was like, I'm going to replace my 6-figure corporate income with writing, which never happened.
Yeah.
But,
in a year. Yeah.
year. Yeah, exactly.
From your lips to God's ears.
That's right. Any second now. Any second.
Anytime. Yeah.
Amen.
But so I was very like that person that focused on the entrepreneurial, independent side, and Greta was very much, focused on the traditional query side. And we were talking all the time about the differences, but also the similarities between the two, because there are a lot of things that cross over. And so we kind of pitched the same writing conference that we had met at a few years later. We pitched a course mainly because we wanted free admission.
Yeah, that's really true. That's how sad it was.
Yeah, we wanted free admission to the conference, and so we pitched a course that was, we called it at the time, Aspiring to Author.
Nice.
Actually, no, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. The very
You
first
are
one,
wrong. The first one was fun. It was like something about your
choose your own adventure.
author career. Choose your own author.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm here for
really.
both of those titles. I like them both.
Yeah.
And so we basically pitched this course where we would each get up and talk about what it took to be indie, what that meant, what that looked like, what it took to be traditional, what that looked like, and what the process was. And we taught this course on it.
It was kind of like a Lucy and Ethel moment, and we really work on maintaining that vibe
That's awesome.
in our on the podcast, on our podcast, and in life. Yes, keep going.
Yeah,
Megan.
I mean, we're very different, but we work well together because we're open to each other's ideas. And it's not like, oh, this is the only way to be, this is what you have to do. That's not true. Everything's different for everybody. So you just got to find the thing that works for you. But anyway, that's kind of how we got started, and how and our whole basis for being as the author wheel, which has morphed from choose your own adventure to aspiring to author to publish, take charge of your author career, and now
which is our first book.
Nice.
And that still is.
Yes,
that still is our book title, but now we are the author wheel, the podcast, and the blog, and the whatever, all the stuff we do.
Yeah, I think part of what I really appreciate about the way you're describing that you came together, just to emphasize a little bit, is your willingness to kind of pivot, right? Like, even though it's to get a free entrance to a conference, because like, I would 100% do that. But the willingness to be like, okay, now I'm going to go this way. Like, this is kind of where the water's flowing, so I'm going to head in this direction. I think that's really, as somebody who's like a meticulous planner, knowing what direction, like being able to let go of my plan to like flow in a different way, has been difficult for me, but I think is also super important as you like venture into this weird industry called publishing.
It's so huge because things change so rapidly in this industry, and there are so many myths surrounding it. You know, it's got
Yeah.
this, like, I was just reading traditional fiction book, and it had two authors as the main characters, and the lives of these, it's like ridiculous. Nobody has those lives. There's just so much fiction around being a fiction author. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, like there
Did you
are the
see
rock
that? Did you see
the
that
rock
Christmas movie
stars.
with Brooke Shields? Not this last Christmas. It came out like 2021, I think it came out, with Brooke Shields. She goes and she buys a Scottish castle with her book income. And I mean, she's supposed to be like a New York, you know, a best-selling
Yeah.
author, traditionally published, whatever, like romance authher, I think.
Yeah.
Um,
And they are prone to
but
buy Scottish castles, you know, like all
right,
the
Of course.
you
best-selling
know,
Why
authors.
and
not?
Yeah.
like she like spends, you know, like an hour on her keyboard, and then she goes off and she walks through the countryside. And I'm just like, oh my God. It
I
just,
know.
it was so
Yeah.
like, it's one of those like doctors who watch medical dramas are like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had the same reaction.
The
Yeah.
book that I just read, similarly,
Yeah.
this author takes off to Paris and is living in a loft and
Oh,
goes walking the streets and sitting by this Seine with her like pad of paper journal, and
ugh.
writes her stories by hand by the water lapping and the sunlight. And it's like, really, come on. Anyway, I digress. Let's get
Yeah.
No,
back to
it's a good digression because I think we hear those stories a lot and we see those stories and we're like, I think especially when we're new, we're like, oh,
yeah.
this is, and like you hold out that dream. You're like, I know that not everybody makes it, not every high school football player makes it to the NFL, but I also secretly believe that I'm the one, right? Like it's that
Mhm.
kind of like, yeah. And I know for me anyway, it was like, I will take any evidence that I'm the one and use that as justification, as like confirmation bias for like, see, I knew I was the one the whole time. So,
Yeah.
I think there is, how did y'all cope? Like, were those myths a struggle for y'all early on, and how do you cope with them now? Does that make sense? Like, how's your, besides laughing at them, like how's your,
Yeah, really.
yeah.
Yeah. You want to go first, Greta, on this one, or do you want me to go? I feel like,
I'll go first
yeah,
this time.
you go first. We're being polite, remember? So
Yeah,
take
that's
it.
right. Right. It's my turn. So I'll just tell you something I said when I got to be on the Wish I'd Known Them podcast. It was really an honor. And we were talking about this and the death of my dream, because I agree with you. I like really truly believed, you know, I know most people are not going to end up, you know, walking in Agatha Christie's shoes or Dorothy Sayers or Ruth Ware, or fill in the famous
Yeah,
author.
I think I read an article that John Grisham's life is now, he writes one book a year. They pay him an absurd amount of money for it. And while he writes, he travels through Europe and like sips coffee in cafes. And then in like
Yeah.
September, he turns in the manuscript and spends September through January like visiting his various grandchildren around the country. And then like
Yeah.
back to work in February. Like, you know, yeah.
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 So
Sorry.
of course,
Yeah.
no, I agree with you. It's that thing. It's like every young actress never believes she's going to have to do a diarrhea commercial. You know, it's like that. So
Yeah.
anyway, so I was at BoucherCon, which is a big mystery thriller writer, and it's mostly traditional. And I just saw, like, this is a good old boys network and a good old girls network. And I the way to break in was to be a journalist for the New York Times, or be a judge, or be a retired FBI, or none of I'm a middle class housewife from Orange County, you know. So it's like, it's not going to happen. And I actually had this dream, which I think you'll think is funny. So I dreamt that I was on a train with George Burns, and George Burns was my agent.
Nice.
I know. And we were having lots of conversation, but the one part that I really remembered, and then I woke up, is George Burns pulled his cigar out of his mouth and he said, "So, do you want to sell books or you want to be important?" And I woke up and
What
I
a
went,
fantastic question.
I want to sell books. And so that's when I decided to start Cryptic Press, which is my own little imprint, and do the next series on my own. It's like,
Nice.
what was, I wasn't important. I wasn't going to be important. And what the heck would have important isn't gonna, pay the bills.
It's
So
such a great question though. Like I remember when I first published my first indie novel, um, I had like promised these readers, these beta readers, signed copies. So I had a big stack and I was going to FedEx and I'm like standing in line with all my like little boxes ready to send out, and the person behind me goes, "Oh, are you an author?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm sending signed copies to a reader." And she goes, are you like doing this on your own, or are you really published?"
yeah.
And I was like, I'm doing it on my own. She was like, "Oh, okay." I'm like, "Leave me alone, lady." Like, back off, man. But it is that like feeling of like, you have to make these decisions about like how important is like where is your goal? Not that like quote unquote being important is wrong. It's just asking yourself like, what are you
Yeah.
Right.
in this for? Yeah, Megan,
Well, and
how did you handle
so I never had the illusion that I would be able to just sip coffee next to the Seine and have it magically be important. And I don't know, like I think because I didn't grow up with that dream of being a writer, like I hadn't romanticized it. So going in, I knew it was going to be a lot of hard work. I think my death of my dream was realizing that it's not a linear progression, that there's no clear corporate path where you're going to do XYZ and
Yeah.
make the money. It's there's so much to this industry that's luck, or that's just who you know, or that's timing, or all these other things that you can't predict what's going to happen. You just got to keep plugging away at it, right? So I think that was harder for me. But again, it's this idea that it's hard work, right? What we do is hard work. And I still have the dream of someday, quote unquote, being important, right? Where I would love, like, my big, like, astronomical dream. And you're probably gonna laugh because I don't know, like, I want to be invited to go to a Comic-Con or some big conference and have like my way paid for and be at one of those tables where people are lining up to sign, to get signed books. Like I want to be that person someday. That is my like huge, like, aspiration thing.
People in cosplay as your characters?
Yes. Oh, that would be amazing, right?
Yep.
That would be like, oh, dream come true.
Yeah.
And so I still have that dream. I still am working toward that. And maybe it'll never happen, but it's like that thing that kind of keeps me going to some extent. And the harder part, or the trick of that, is not getting discouraged when that's not happening tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am going to be at WonderCon this year, but I'm paying for it.
Right. Nobody's asked you to come.
You're just coming. To go.
It's just a gracious gift that you're appearing there. It's not.
Yeah.
How do y'all motivate over time? What mind games do you play? This isn't on the list of questions I asked, so I'm just throwing it out you.
But it's a good one.
That's a good question.
Good one.
I was just saying to my husband the other day that I think it was really a mixed blessing that I came up with the 7 deadly sins as the theme for my first series, and that I had a traditional, deal for that, because I couldn't stop. So when book 3 came out to crickets, and I wanted to go curl up in a ball somewhere and hide because I was so, discouraged and embarrassed. And I wanted to stop and go get a job at Costco doing that, checking those receipts when you walk out the door. That was my idea for, income. I just, I couldn't, because I am a committed. When I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And I said I would do it, and I'm not going to let my publisher down, and I had to do it. And I think that was really good for me. I mean, I think I kind of needed that external whip cracking behind me to keep me going. So I don't know if that's helpful for a lot of listeners, but that definitely
Well,
Yeah, I think
helped.
external motivations are incredibly important. Like it's,
mhm.
you know, yeah. I'm sorry, Megan, were you gonna say something?
No, I was going to say, I think as someone who doesn't have, external deadlines, all my deadlines are internal and I miss them frequently. But
They're just
they
suggestions.
they're just kind of like
Yeah.
these
Like
thoughts that happen.
they're like traffic rules in New York.
Yeah,
It's just something that's like, you know, that we all agree that these exist, but
yeah,
we
yeah,
don't all agree to
exactly.
follow them. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I've come up with is rather than focusing on deadlines, I focus on my weekly wins. And this is something that's
Mhm.
new for me, mind you. I just started really doing that this year because I was getting, like, I've never had the urge to quit because I don't know what else I would do, to be honest. Like,
Costco, I swear
I think,
that little,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
kind of
but
like writing.
Costco,
You take the pen and you go whoop over the
Mhm.
receipt. Very
yeah, but then I
satisfying.
can't take my kids to school or pick
Uh,
them up or take
uh,
them to activities, right?
yeah,
Like,
there you go.
part of my whole reason for not reason for being a writer, but reason for building my own business was because I wanted to be home with my kids. I wanted to be able to have a flexible schedule that I could work around them instead of having them work around my work schedule. So anyway, I don't know what else I would do. But so I keep going mostly because I'm just stubborn and can't come up with something else. But what I have started doing this year to help with the motivation is actually tracking my weekly wins. So I have this, and this started as a joke with my husband because we were watching these YouTube videos about bullet journaling, and we were making fun of some of these YouTubers, which is terribly mean of me. And so I apologize to any of the YouTubers that I made fun of. Because now I'm doing it.
Give us names. Give us. No, I'm just kidding.
but so he bought me as a joke for Christmas the same bullet journal that this one woman was using. And I was like, okay, well, you know what, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to make it work for me and specifically for work. And so I have like a little habit tracker, so I'm checking off, I'm making my X's on all the days that I'm writing, or that I get the
Nice.
podcast work done, or that I get my newsletter sent out, whatever. Like, so I'm tracking what I've done and every day. And then I set my goals and my strategies for the year and for each quarter, and then I break it down to each month, and then from each month, like, I'm a nerd. It's all right. And then I track my weekly wins. So every week I go through and I say, okay, what did I actually accomplish this week? And once you start looking at those positive things, and oh my gosh, like, we do so much and we are achieving so much every week. So even when you feel like, oh my God, nobody's reading my books or whatever, it's like, yeah, but I'm writing, I've gotten this done. I had this reader, gave me a positive review, or for the podcast. Oh, we broke through 1,500 downloads a couple weeks ago. So I wrote that down, so all those little things that add up and give me that encouragement to keep going. I'm writing that down so I can always flip back and look at it.
Nice. That's awesome. And I love that. Like, I think that's super important because the negatives, even if there's like 1 to 5, 1 negative to 5 positives, that negative can feel so like overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
You
know,
can
that-
have 55-star reviews, and then that one person comes along, gives you a 1-star review and says, this book wasn't worth reading. This book, wasn't important. And what do you think about? Do you think about that? You don't think about the 50 people who loved your book and can't wait for the next one, right? So
Yeah, it's the only reviews I read. The only reviews I read are the 1-star reviews. So
I
Yeah.
will not read them anymore, because if I read them, which thank God most of the 1-star reviews I've gotten lately, they don't write anything, and I don't have very many. But I wouldn't read them anyway, because the few times I have, I can't write. I don't write for almost an entire week because I just wallow.
Yeah.
So all you people out there who are considering 1-star reviews, just rethink it.
Yeah.
I said it.
That's right. Especially if you're a writer. Come on, writers. and you can always tell. I got a 1-star. My co-writer and I, JP, just got a 1-star review from a writer on a book that comes out on March 18th. And they're God bless them. They're talking about like grammar and like they're talking about character arcs and they're talking about like character transformation. I'm like, readers don't talk like this. You are clearly a writer. So
Yes.
it's like,
and
don't
probably
come off my reviews, writer. Yeah.
And probably it's someone who hasn't published yet too. Like I've seen a lot of that where you get
I
the
avoided
worst
chasing their name.
negative
I was like, I will not
reviews.
pursue this person.
Yeah. I get the worst negative reviews from hobbyist writers who want to write but maybe haven't actually achieved that yet, or they can't find the time, or which is all the things we're trying to teach and trying to encourage these people to actually go and do. But some of them turn that very, very dark. I feel like they take it inward and it becomes
I think that exercise, like I empathize actually very deeply with that, because I think there is an exercise in critiquing someone else's work. It feels impersonal, right? Like you don't realize that there's actually an author on the other side of that thing that is like wallowing, like you said, Greta. And then at the same time, it is I read negative reviews from writers as much as like, this is what's wrong with your book, because I do like take them to heart. And she was like, the character growth arcs are off, and I was like, I know, but it's fun. But there's that, like, I do take the feedback that's there, but I also see and understand that like part of this is you saying who you want to be.
Yeah.
When you read my book, you reflected on your own aspirations, and I can have deep empathy for that. Like I can understand, like, you don't realize that like the 1-star review is like crippling me. You're actually thinking about your own work, and like as you read, you're like considering yourself. And part of me is like, I get it, like I understand. So it keeps me from losing my mind a little bit.
I also think that you don't, when you're a very, very new writer, before you've kind of come up against the hard knocks and the editors and the agents who like scoff at you and those kinds of things, you don't realize like how difficult it is to like you have good taste. You think everybody thinks they have good taste, right? We have good taste in literature, books, stories. We know the kind of writing we like. We know the kind of stories we like. We don't realize how difficult it is to replicate that in the beginning. It's like, just because I love C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia, just because I love that doesn't mean that I can sit down and write that.
Oh, if I could,
just because I love, some super fancy chef-made meal doesn't mean that I can just go buy the ingredients and whoop it up in my kitchen. Like, and I think that there's that place. It took me like a while to realize that just because I had good taste in literature and writing, that didn't mean that I could replicate that. And that was a very humbling when you go, I know what's good, and what I just wrote ain't it. Just not good yet.
It is kind of a breaking point I think we all run into, is like, it's not as easy to do as I thought it was.
It's much more difficult.
So part of what y'all do is help authors that are starting off, overcome roadblocks. What are you seeing in authors? Like, what is outside of 1-star reviews? Because that's not, maybe that's just my own neuroses. I'm going to drive the conversation to that. But what are y'all seeing are slowing authors down and keeping them from moving forward?
I think so. The one that has always been a trigger. So when we used to before COVID, we had this weekly writing group that we would go and sit in a coffee shop with a group, and we would chat about writing, and we'd do like a write-in where we'd sit and we'd write for an hour or whatever, and then we'd chat. And that group really kind of, I think, solidified our early understanding of the kinds of writers we were trying to reach and the kinds of writers that we were trying to help, because mostly women, to be fair, there were a few men, but this group of writers, they were struggling to understand how to stay focused, how to actually get the work done, how not to go down rabbit holes or like, spend way too much time on research or world building rather than actually writing. A lot of them didn't understand what they were trying to write, even like they had this idea for this story, but it would end up sort of meandering and, not really, they had a hard time focusing, right? So I think that's kind of where we got started. And that's been a large part of the kinds of courses and things that we've taught to this point, because it is so hard. Like, I mean, I still to this day, like I have mom friends who maybe don't want to be writers, but they want to do something. And they're like, how do you do it? Like, how do you manage to take care of the house and take care of the kids and do these things and find the time? And how are you not just completely exhausted? I'm like, here, I wrote a book on it. But which is a true story.
Yeah. And the worst present to give someone is the book you just wrote.
Yes, unfortunately, it is.
Here's a present with all of the baggage that I've handed
yeah.
over. Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I think that's a big part of it. When you're first starting out, it's like, how do you manage your time and your focus and getting your butt in your chair to actually do the work? I think that's step one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so actually this is leading into we do have, I think Megan mentioned in the very beginning that we do have a Kickstarter that will be kicking off pretty soon. And we're kind of combining our first 3 quick guides. And the first one that she just mentioned is productive writing habits. And that's where, that if all you do is talk about what you're going to write and you never actually do it, well, that is definitely a big roadblock. You got to sit down and get your butt. And so that book kind of goes through a lot of those methods and ways and things to fit it in. And then the second thing that we saw in this, I really ran into when I was pitching my first book. And that is understanding your genre. People, and in fact, we talked about this when we had you on our podcast, Jeff, and you were telling us about how you thought you were writing urban fantasy, and it's like, not
right.
so much, it really wasn't.
I was very, very off.
Yeah. And I, when it hit me, I had an editor who had asked for a full manuscript. She came back and she said, so this reads kind of like literary fiction, but it also seems like a thriller in parts. And then in other parts, it feels like a romance. You need to make up your mind what you're writing. And that was just like, whoa, I didn't know. So I kind of came up with this whole way of investigating. I thought I was writing a thriller. That's what I wanted to write. So I came up with this whole method of just figuring out exactly what were the genre expectations of thrillers and how do you write a thriller and what, and all of that. And so we go over all of that in our book on understanding your genre. And now with Amazon sales, where things have become so granular, it's not just a thriller anymore. Is it a geopolitical thriller, or is it, an FBI thriller, or is it a psychological suspense thriller, or, there's so many different kinds. And like, get into romance, you talk to a romance author and it's like they are splintered off into tons and tons of little categories. So it's becoming, I think, more and more important to kind of understand what the heck it is you're trying to write.
Yeah. And I think it's getting even more complicated because I was just finishing Trudy's new book, The Anatomy of Genre.
Oh, I love that book.
He lays out at the beginning, he's like, you can't even just write one anymore. You have to cross genre. You have to have at least 2.
Yeah.
And it can feel hopeless for a writer, which is why I think it's super important that, like you're talking about, writers are in community with one another, because this is a team sport, right? Like this isn't, we have that image of like we were talking about earlier of like, I'm going to go to a cafe in Paris or a castle in Scotland and write by myself in the moors, but that's not how this works, because not only is understanding genre tropes difficult, but they're always changing. So like they're always like, they're in a constant state of flux. Like what was, urban fantasy when I published mine in 2000, 15 is no longer urban fantasy, right? Like that term has moved and shifted,
Mhm.
and it's this ever morphing thing. And the only way to keep track of it is to have a strategy like you're talking about, Greta, and then also like make sure you're in community with people, like make sure
Yeah.
that you're like some way. And the nice thing about the world we live in is you don't have to do it in person, you can do it online too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I had to do it in person, I'd never know anybody, because life is too crazy. I got a full-time day job, and I got,
Yeah.
kids, and kids going to college, and like there's not time for me to take off to New York to go spend like 4 days at Thriller Fest. I would love to, but that's just
Mm.
that's not how my life is designed right now. Megan, I'm sorry, I cut you off. You were gonna say something.
No, actually, it kind of segues in really nicely, because one of my favorite stories on Greta is that when she was first pitching agents, and I don't remember which manuscript this was. It might have been Margin of Lust. I'm not sure, but she went in
Oh,
and
yeah.
was like, "Oh yeah, it's a cozy horror,"
I did.
and the agent laughs.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Like that's not a thing, right? Well, come to find out, recently I saw it advertised, and I sent Greta the picture.
Yeah.
Somebody posted their, on their book description, it's a cozy horror.
Yeah.
We don't know that, we've never told the story to, as far as I know.
Funny.
Like,
I need to meet this writer.
That's
yeah,
hysterical.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
was
so it's
I
like,
was working with a writer this week who was telling me that she was writing a cozy thriller. And I was like, I don't think that's a thing. And she's like, well,
apparently it is.
she's like, these are the elements I'm taking from cozy, and these are the elements I'm taking from thriller, and I'm putting them together. And I'm like, hey, you got a strategy, you know what you're doing. Like, I ain't gonna argue with you. Like, let's do that. But so yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's great though. Cozy horror. That's amazing.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, needless to say that actually that wasn't my first published book. That was my
Was it
first
the
book. The first
terrible,
book
terrible one?
terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day book. Yeah, that book.
Yeah.
Never got published.
It's really funny.
Yeah. The first chapter was amazing because I must have rewritten that 45,000 times, which is another thing new authors do, new writers do. Don't do that, because the rest of the book was terrible. So I get like requests because the first chapter was really good. I mean, I knew how to write. I wrote for magazines. I just didn't know how to tell a story.
Mhm.
And so I would rewrite, make the language beautiful on chapter one. And then these agents and editors and stuff, they would ask for more, like 50 pages or the whole manuscript. They get it and they go, what the heck is this? I mean, like, it's a cozy horror.
Why do we do that then? Why do we obsess over our early chapters? Is it because we don't know how to tell the story, or is there something else going on there? Like, what do y'all think that is?
I think that's a big part of it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I find even still, even after as many books as I've written, which I can't remember, it's like 8 fiction titles now. I still do that, right? Like, because because I'm a pantser, mostly pantser.
I'm shocked with the way you described tracking weekly wins and spreadsheets.
Oh, I know. I shock everybody all the time.
Like,
but
no, right.
creatively, my brain works differently than, like, I have a split personality. So yeah. Oh,
that's great. I think it's
very
awesome.
like, I would probably be a field day for some psychologist somewhere, because it's weird. And I shock everybody with that. But no, I'm mostly a pantser. Like, I do have things that I do that are kind of like outlining or plotting, but I'm mostly a pantser. And so what I've found, like, for whatever reason, the book I'm writing right now is really becoming challenging for me. Like, I've this, like, pulling taffy. Like, I love this story. I love these characters. I don't know why it's being so hard, but it's hard. So I find myself doing that, where, like, I keep, getting to a point and I kind of get like, I slow down to like I'm walking through molasses, right? Like, and it's just every sentence is hard. And so I go back and I reread the beginning because I don't know what I'm doing. And so, and then, as of course, I go back and I reread through, because I'm trying to find the thread that I've lost, or the story that I'm trying to tell in this thing. And of course, as I go, I edit the beginning again. So the beginning of this book is really good.
Yeah, but it sounds like you're like trying to feel your way into the story.
Yeah.
Kind of find that thread, and then once you have it, you can tug on it to the end. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but this is like, well, I guess it's the second time I've done this now where I still haven't quite finished writing the end, but I'm through the big battle scene, but I need to like figure out how to wrap it all up. So I'm going back to the beginning, rereading through, finding all those threads, making sure they all tie up nicely, and so that I can wrap up the story at the end. So I've done it like twice on this book, but
Nice.
it was a bad habit when I first started writing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is the part that most people, especially people who were readers, people who have like a little bit of a flair for language and those kinds of things. I think one of the hardest things for them to do is to get their nose, like you can't see the forest for the trees. You're so focused on the details and that you don't back up and see the big picture. And that I think is why, like, I just kept thinking it was all about sentences and the words I chose and all of that. And that is important, but that's like way down the line. The first step is to get that story out. And in order to do that, you have to learn to understand, you have to understand things. You have to move into understanding things that most of us kind of know intuitively, but we've never studied. And that is story structure, like what makes a good story? What is a character arc? What makes a satisfying story ending? It's like people say that most people read books because of the characters, not because of the plot. And by and large, I would agree with that. I mean, there are books, you just want to keep going back and visiting with this cast of characters. But I also think there has to be a satisfying plot. And if the satisfying plot line isn't there, it doesn't have to be as unique and outstanding. It's not going to be that story that nobody's ever heard before because it doesn't exist. Every story has been told in some regard, right? But it has to have that feeling of mounting tension. It has to have conflict. It has to have, the promise of the premise. Like if your premise is this is a murder mystery, you're going to have to throw down clues and you're going to have red herrings and all those elements that are in a murder mystery. Because if you don't, your readers are not going to be happy with this thing. And that I think is the tricky part for newer writers.
There's a weird thing you're describing in that, like, there's an expectation readers have coming to the book based on the cover and the way that you've advertised it, and like you as the author have in some way established those expectations, or at a minimum the publisher has. And so the book becomes a conversation of like, how are you meeting and surpassing my expectations at the same time? And that's what I hear you saying, is that like there's that need to like know the conversation you're having with the reader and like understand that, like, hey, I understand that you've come with these expectations. These are the ways I'm going to delight you with those, and then these are the ways I'm going to surprise you with those. And there's that, like, kind of navigating around that.
Yeah, which I love that conversation with the reader, because that is exactly what books are. It's you as the writer put your ideas and your stories and your characters and your, the plot line. If you get all of that right, the reader still is coming to it with their own perspective and their lens that they're coming to the book with is, yes, a component of how you've advertised it and what they're expecting, but it's also what's going on in their life today. How are they interpreting your words? Because their interpretation is going to be different than what you actually put on the page. And I mean, we all know this from like, well, I don't know, like this is something I've laughed about in the past, where like in, your English lit classes in high school or college, like, oh, the author, the blue curtains represent the sadness of their soul. It's like, no, the author probably just wanted blue curtains.
The author's probably sitting in a room with blue curtains, to be honest. The curtains are blue.
Exactly. But it is a conversation between the writer and the reader. And once your book is out into the world, you can't control that anymore. You can't control how they're going to receive it. You can do your best to prepare them to set them up to be the right reader at the right time for that book. But but you can't ultimately control how they react to the words on the page.
Yeah, and I think, I'm just knowing your stories a little more. I think you'd agree with this. I think we spend time as new writers being frustrated with things that just are.
Mhm.
Like, I know I spent a lot of time like being mad at readers for not embracing the genius that I was putting on the page. I never would have said those words, but that was kind of what was happening. Was I was like, why can't they just take my story for what my story is? And a little bit of that is like, being mad at the ocean that you can't swim across it. It's like the ocean is big. There's no reason to be mad at the ocean for being big. It's the same with readers. Like, there's no reason to being mad at the way the system is set up. It is what it is. Like, and I think there's a place as new authors where the sooner we are willing to embrace this world may not be fair, it may not be just, it may be like, yes, like to get that traditional contract, you have to network in order to like get those that may not be fair. Like, in order to get the indie deal, yeah, you're gonna have to write a ton, you're gonna have to work really hard, and you may not take off right away, and it may be a fight all the way up the mountain. um but like, to get that, and the fight may never end. For some of us, it feels like it's never gonna end, but that like might be the way it is. But there's no reason to get mad at that. Like, you don't have
It's
the
a
power to change it. It is what
well,
it is.
and it's a skill like anything else, right? And writing stories is a skill set. If you keep at it, you will get better at it. You'll understand what you're doing better. You'll understand, and then that thing that comes to you, like, I also play music, and not everybody loves every kind of music.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't like screaming electric guitars. So sue me. Like, if they start happening, I leave the room. They hurt my ears. I can't stand them. That heavy duty old rock and roll is so popular with a lot of people. It's like everybody, I love opera. Lots of people don't. I love it. So, I mean, we all have different things. And when you begin to realize that your books are not for everybody, and how can you find your specific readers and please those readers? And then I truly believe that most one-star reviews come from the fact that the wrong person picked up your book. And it's more the marketing, the cover, the blurb,
Mhm.
whatever, than it is I
Yeah.
mean,
And
provided that
where you put it to be reviewed. Like, we were talking about the one-star review
right,
earlier. That's partially our, like, mine and JP's fault. We put the book up to be reviewed at a place where authors get books reviewed. So like, it's yeah, there's writers there who are reviewing books because they want their book reviewed, and that's how the system of that site works, is like, hey, you'll get
right,
more reviews if you review other people's books. So like, I did that to myself. And again, like, there's no reason to be mad at it. Like, it is what it is. I
right.
would love to have a Brandon Sanderson size following where I can put out a book and a gazillion people pay for it on Kickstarter before I ever write a
Yeah.
word. Like, that would be great.
$42 million later.
Yeah, but I don't, like, I don't have that. So I have the resources that I have. And
Yeah.
it's like, working within, taking this small steps within my own confines is kind of what I hear y'all talking about
Yeah.
overall. Yeah.
And presenting, and then that's the second part. I mean, we were really talking about the writing and what gets in people's way, but the second part of that is also then learning to present your work to the right people in the right way at the right time and through the right venues and all of that kind of thing, but that's like a whole separate skill set. Like, but first you got to write the
Yeah.
dang thing.
But when we're talking about motivation, it all comes together, right?
Yeah.
Like, when you're talking about like
Mhm.
motivation to finish the work, there is, like, we can divide it into these sections of like, we got to do this, and we got to do this, and we got to do this. But the truth is, when it comes to motivation, you've got this dream. I mean, y'all can fight back with me on this if you want, but for me, it's like, it's all this emotional journey, and you have to figure out how to sustain and motivate that emotional journey over a long term. And
Yeah.
um, yeah.
I think most writers who start this and actually find success are really stubborn. I think we have to
Mhm.
be. I think it's like a personality trait,
Mhm.
because most writers, I mean, there's lightning in a bottle, right? Where you
Mhm.
knock it out of the park on your debut. but that's lightning in a bottle, right? For the rest of us, you just got to keep at it. You just got to keep trudging forward. And so that stubbornness has to be part of who you are and how you approach it. Because, you know, like I said, like going for me, like I definitely mentally split up the creative side of my process, the actual writing, with the business side. The business side is far more analytical. The creative side, like I said, I don't really outline. I do have plot diagrams and things that I do, but I don't really outline. And for me, that works. And then it comes together. And I have to say, like, I'm still trying to find I have great fans. I have some true fans, but it's a small group of people still. So I'm still trying to find those perfect readers and finding that and learning those skills. That's different than the writing side of things, because the writing is about story structure and plot and character arcs and all that stuff, which is great. But now you have to figure out how to present that in a visual way with your cover and, you know, copywriting and triggers and psychology and all these other things, advertising platforms and yada, yada, yada. So you're never ending. There's always something more to learn. And you just have to be stubborn enough to keep going and keep learning and find the method to the madness that works for you.
I've heard several times now from different authors that they would have a series up, they'd have or a book up, or, you know, book or series, and it's not doing anything, and they're not getting great reviews. It's just not selling. Then they would rewrite the blurb and potentially recover it, and the thing would take off, and all of a sudden have a bajillion fantastic reviews. So I think for us to get too hurt if we hit the wrong crowd and get some bad reviews it's counterproductive, because if you just took that book and presented it in a slightly different way to a slightly different group of people, they might be raving over that book, you know, because it never fails to astound me that I'll pick up a traditionally published book that has got all the accolades, hit the New York Times bestseller list. It's all the things, right, that we all want. And I'm reading it and I'm going, it's fine. It's fine. Oh, what is the secret sauce here? I don't get it. Like, it's fine. It's, you know, but it's not fabulous. But the publisher and that author, they knew how to present that book, where to present it. And then I also think that if you get some positive social proof, people tend to want to go with the flow and what everybody else says, right? They want to, you know, all the crowd is lauding this thing. Most people are going to go toward it going, oh, I bet it's really good. Whereas if somebody comes out and goes, this thing sucks, you know, then a whole bunch of people are going to go, yeah, I thought so too. I mean, everybody wants to be part of the crowd. So if you can get some good social proof. So bad story on me. When my first book, First of the Seven Deadly Sins, came out, it's The Margin of Lust was the name of it. I've rewritten it. We're retitling it. It's coming out in May. It's going to be
the titles. That's a great title.
Yeah. The new title is The Liability of Lust, because I kind of think people thought when I said margin that a little lust was okay. But in this case, it like leads you to a serial killer. So it's really not. Anyway, so we're changing the title. But
and it was interesting to be walking through the hotel lobby and have a bunch of nuns in the room as you got this giant poster board of the cover.
Megan and I was
Margin of Lust, and it's not a romance.
I was a keynote speaker for this conference we were teaching on, and Megan and I were walking in, and my publisher had made me this poster that was almost as tall as I am, and it said "A Margin of Lust." We walked right into this group of nuns. It was
that's amazing.
It was fantastic. It was fantastic, especially because the irony of it was there was nothing inappropriate in the book.
No, the reason it's lust is because she ain't getting any.
Yeah, tell that to the nuns. Yeah.
So here was my story of the very short story that's getting longer as we speak. So I was brand new I didn't know. And I saw this like really inexpensive author cross promotion, and it was supposed to be romance, romantic suspense, and suspense. All three of those genres mushed together, which should have triggered something in my brain anyway. Like, no, that's not a good idea. But I was, as I said, new and stupid. So I asked my publisher if it was okay if I put it in there. And she said, sure. And I put it in there. And the day the cross promotion comes out, I was like, oh no. Oh no, because my book was the only book that didn't have a naked male chest. The only one. And it says lust in big red letters on the title. And it has a door. Like, what's behind the door? Anyway, it took me almost a year and a half with letters and everything to Barnes and Noble to get all of them to stop putting me in gay erotica. I was like, no, this is a thriller. I mean, not that there's anything wrong with that, but that is not my book. It's like, and then I was getting bad reviews because people were expecting all this steamy stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
And that
they
was
get
not
to like chapter 3 and they're like, what is going on? Yeah.
And why is this guy beating some woman's head against the floor and murdering her? I thought that they were going to be doing other stuff. So yeah, it was a
different
different
total marketing disaster.
Now what I can do the joke.
I know. So what if I were to take those reviews though? You see what I'm saying? Like, what if I know it's funny? We laugh now. I did not think it was funny at the time.
No, of course not.
So, but what if I were to have taken those 1 and 2 star reviews to heart? Mm-hmm. And just walked away and said, oh, I can't do this. Isn't for me. I'm a crap writer. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, I am a crap erotica writer. I will embrace that. That is not my genre. I don't do that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just ain't me. So, but that's my kind of point too, is finding. Oh, and this just segues so great to something we wanted to mention, and I didn't do it on purpose, but it's clarifying your author brand. Mm-hmm. Finding who you are as a writer is hugely important, both for yourself, so you know where you're aiming, and then also so you know how to present yourself to the world in such a way that you're going to find those readers who want what Megan Haskell writes, who find what Jeff Elkins writes, and what it because we're all different, obviously.
And I think that it's something that, one of our sort of sub taglines is that we've made the mistakes so you don't have to. And so we try to be pretty honest with a lot of our mistakes. Yes. And so one of my mistakes was that I had, the Sanyari Chronicles are very much action adventure portal fantasy. Kick-ass heroine, carnivorous pixies, they're for fantasy on the shorter side, they're about 80,000 words or 300 some odd pages. And so I had written 4 books in the series plus a novella, and they were doing pretty well. And I was like, great, I'm going to pull a Marvel, right? I'm going to go and I'm going to write another book that's set in the same world, but it's a prequel and it's going to be epic fantasy, right? Like, and it's still fantasy. So of course my readers are going to follow along and just really love this book. And they're going to be so excited about learning more about these, older characters and the history of the world. And
it's the Haskell cinematic universe. Here we go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It failed. I mean, it's a great book. It was a self-publishing blog off Spiffbo, self-published fantasy blog off, semi-finalist, which is, it's a kind of a little online contest thing that is fairly popular within the fantasy community. So it was semi-finalist. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
It was a honorable mention in the Reader's Favorite Awards. It's a good book.
Yeah.
Wrong audience. My audience didn't carry over to that book. And I realized it came back to this author branding aspect, where I had never gone through this exercise prior to writing that book. This is kind of something, I don't know, when did we develop this, Greta? It was like 3-ish years ago, 4-ish.
Yeah. I think I started it I was teaching at the Southern California Christian Writers Conference. Mm-hmm. And so I came up with something along these lines about clarifying your author brand for that.
And so it was something that through COVID, after publishing, because of course I published that book right at the beginning of COVID, which was another problem as well. So this book had some things going against it. And I am going to ultimately, I have the first draft of the second book finished. So I just have to actually go back and edit the hot mess that it is. But anyway, point being, sort of through COVID, and I went through this process and did this with Greta, and we started talking about taglines and clarifying what it is that you're trying to write and who you are as a writer, what your purpose is, what your motivation is. And of course, at the same time, we've been doing a lot of more work with the Enneagram personalities and using that both for character development, but also on ourselves and what, satisfies our core motivations and so forth. And so we developed this process over time where you kind of go through these steps and you end up with this tagline for your writing. And if you can keep that core motivation, and if you can keep that sort of tagline in mind as you're developing new stories and developing new books and stuff, then you'll be more satisfied as a writer. Your readers will understand what kinds of books they're going to get from you, what they're not going to get from you. And it makes everything around the writing career and the writing life a little bit easier, a little bit more clear. It's not so muddy. And so that's actually part of, so we're going back to what Greta was saying. This is kind of the segue into this, is that as the lead in to our Kickstarter that we're going to be launching sometime soon, we are doing a free little 5-day email course, mini course on how to go through this process, how to create your author brand, find your motivation, tie that up into a mission statement, and then ultimately bring that together into a one-line author tagline.
That's fantastic.
Just like you would for a book.
Yeah. And I think that's super valuable, because not only does it help you figure out your genre and your marketing strategy and all that kind of stuff, but when I went through that exercise with a friend, it helped me accept who I was as a writer, which goes into motivation and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, and plus, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to do periodically, because we're not stagnant beings. When human beings grow and change, it's like, I never thought that I wanted to independently publish fiction. And now I'm really getting a big kick out of it, and I love it. And it's something different. And I thought I only wanted to write, psychological suspense. And I have that series and I love it, but I'm having fun writing paranormal cozies now. And I write something with more humor. It's like a blast. Yeah. So, we do grow.
But still, your tagline and your branding, because we just put together the emails for this, so we actually know.
Yes, we did.
But your branding encompasses that, even still. So like, even though now you're moving, this series has moved a little bit away from the traditional thriller and is a little bit more humorous, it still fits within that sort of that branding, that promise that you're giving your readers as Greta Boris author.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. And I think it sounds like a fantastic experience. Let's thank you for giving me time today. I told you an hour and I'm already holding you over. So
no worries.
Talk to us about where, if anybody wants to look for more, where can we find you in the web world?
In the world's wide webs.
In the world wide webs and the internet.
So the Author Wheel, we're at authorwheel.com. You can go there. If you go to authorwheel.com/stuff, you can sign up for our newsletter, and which kind of ties more into the podcast, which we didn't really talk about the podcast all that much, but oh well. But we have a podcast, the Author Wheel podcast.
I'll say something about that when you're done saying what you're saying.
Yeah. But so if you go to authorwheel.com/stuff, you can download. We have 2 freebies right now. One is the top 5 roadblocks that authors must overcome. And it's a worksheet. So it's kind of the common things that we've seen. And then with questions and space to sort of journal and put together, kind of your own strategy for overcoming those roadblocks. And then the second one is the author strategy template, which is a process that Greta and I went through ourselves over the holidays and put together for the new year to help us sort of develop, again, it kind of goes back, knowing who you are, your motivation, walking through the steps, figuring out, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and then what kind of, given those strengths and weaknesses, what kind of author career are you looking for? So therefore, what kind of strategy are you trying to develop around your writing? And then the tactics to actually achieve that strategy.
Nice.
So those are the 2 downloads. Download them. You get them from BookFunnels. So then you sign up for our list. And then our list has our takeaways from our podcast.
Nice.
Right. And the free mini course that we were just talking about, the 1 week to clarifying your author brand, by the time this episode airs, we should have that ready. There should be links on the website. We can also give you a link, Jeff, to that once we get our acts in gear, but that's coming too. And all of these freebies and fun things are kind of leading up to getting people ready for the Kickstarter, which is, Christmas, New Year's, and Easter all rolled into one for us. It's going to be fun.
That's awesome.
So the podcast, just quickly, it's relatively new. We're on our 2nd season. We've had amazing guests. Every so often we do a duo episode where we just kind of have to talk about all the stuff we've learned from our amazing guests and kind of like sort it out in our own brains for everybody. But what we focus on is common roadblocks that writers have and how people overcome them. So we ask every guest we have on the podcast, what was their biggest roadblock and how did they overcome it? And we had you, Jeff, on. So everybody, if you want to hear Jeff being grilled instead of doing the grilling, you should come on over.
I think you're our number 1 top downloaded episode right now, too.
Nice. Thanks.
Yeah.
Number one. Number one. Yeah. That's actually just me listening to it over and over again. That's all that is. But I'll do it for the stats.
Yeah. But it was a really, really helpful, wonderful episode. So
Right,
yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to hit stop record and we can chat a little bit more off the nice. Thanks again for doing this, y'all.
Thank you.